So welcome, colleagues, this evening to NPQH Submitting a Successful Application. My name is Tim McShane, Lead Online Learning Specialist for Best Practice Network, and I'm hosting this evening's event. And the main person here, though, is Yvonne Gandhi. She's the lead facilitator for NPQH, and she's going to be taking you through submitting a successful application form this evening. So thank you all so much for being here, Yvonne. Really appreciate the time you've taken to do this. And thank you everybody out there for coming along to this session. I hope you find it really beneficial. Just to say, we will be recording this evening's event, and you will receive a recording plus any details needed to apply for NPQH, and also some contact details if you have any questions about applying for NPQH as well. Just to say also, if you have any questions during the session, please use the question box. Nobody will see those questions except for myself, Yvonne, and I will field those to her. And also, you should see on your control panel there a handouts box. In this handout box, you'll find the competency headlines and also the NPQH National Application Form. You should have these two open. If you download the National Application Form, you've started to fill it out, have that open, please, this evening, and also a copy of the competency headlines. If for some reason you haven't got a copy, your copy of the application form, please feel free to click those links and download them and have them open as we go along. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Yvonne. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you. You can see who the attractive person is there. And I have to say the important team are Hamish, Chris and Beth, all of which help us be at the right place at the right time with the right people. Can I just welcome everybody? In Cheshire it's dull, but a bit better than it was first thing this morning when it was raining. I hope where you all are across the country that the weather is going to be a bit better than it was here yesterday and first thing this morning. I didn't even manage to get my game of tennis last night. The weather was so bad. There's two things I'm going to be doing today, colleagues. One, introduce you to who Best Practice Network and what we stand for is, because I think it's really important when you're choosing to make your application that you also make sure that we are the right licensee for you. So I will give you some information about us, and I will be going through the application. Now, obviously, online, there's only so much I can do, but my promise to you that my email address is at the end, and if anyone can be bothered to get back to me if there's a query following today, I'll always get back to you. So it is going to be a whistle-stop tour in the hour, but we're going to fly through, and I'm going to make sure that you're clear about the application, clear about who we are, and there's some top tips for filling the application in. Just one other thing, if you could have a piece of paper and pen or pencil available, that would be helpful for a bit later on. Tim, can you just change the slide, please?
Sure. I could just imagine lots of people scrabbling around now for that piece of pen and paper.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. You'll give me a bit of time there.
Right.
That's basically what we're doing. Just a little thing about Gateway. I don't know whether you're lucky or unlucky. It depends how you look at this. But Gateway assessment for this next intake is only by application. So it's really important that you do get your application really tight, really clear, and really answering the questions that you're asked. Because in the past, there's been two elements to Gateway: the assessment by application and assessment by interview. The only time you will be called for interview will be if your application is borderline. So if your application is borderline, you will be either, they're not clear how they're going to do this, either by a telephone call and or a one-to-one hour interview, just to check that there's no mistakes made if you're borderline. Just move on, please. Just who we are then. We are, Best Practice Network are a licensee. We have 3 licensees across the country, hence the geographical makeup of colleagues in this conversation today. We are a gold-rated provider, and we have been judged to be that by HMI on behalf of the National College for Teaching and Leadership. We have had a significant number of candidates engaged across the leadership curriculum qualifications. And in the Northwest particularly, we have had very high numbers. In fact, we take in the Northwest 70% of all NPQH colleagues eligible that come through Gateway, and a significant number in our other two licensees. Can you change the slide, please, Tim? So these are the licensees that you're likely to sign up with. And again, as I said before, the difference now is that your application is the only main thread for assessment, and you will apply direct to the licensee. So when you look at the link that we've sent you, you'll find that if you're down south, there'll be a link, and on the front of the application it will say the Outstanding Leaders Alliance. If you're coming in through the Midlands, it will say Lead, and if you're coming in through the Northwest, it will say the Outstanding Leaders Partnership. So you can apply to any one of those three licensees depending on where geographically you live. And just depending on how many applications come through to us and how many then are successful in the application, we will sort of, within the geography, we will identify key hub sites where we'll then run the face-to-face training. Obviously, in terms of the online training, that won't matter, because one of the unique elements of the programme is that colleagues who are in Swindon and colleagues who are on the Wirral, that you'll be able to talk together online wherever you're based. Thanks, Tim.
Just a question come through. Is there a limit for the number of successful applications for this application round with Best Practice Network?
No, we can take, obviously we can take hundreds. We've got a significant number of head teachers across the country that work with us. I lead across the three licensees the actual NPQH, its delivery, its standards, its quality, and really we won't know till the sort of July date that we've been given how many are actually signed up, but the numbers aren't an issue. What's the issue to us is knowing as soon as possible how many get through Gateway successfully. And I'll tell you in a minute what the timeline and the timescales are. But there are three licensees, the high quality, and that's been recognised by HMI. Just a little bit about what we stand for. Those 5 strands there are really what we're trying to achieve, and these form the foundation on which we build our partnerships and quality standards. And as I said, we are a first choice provider for NPQH across the different regions that we work in. I'm not going to read them to you because you're going to get a set of slides after today, but I just think it's really important that you see not only what we're trying to achieve, and if you just change slides, please, Tim. And this is what I suppose that we believe in are our signature characteristics. I will have failed you wherever part of the country you're in if you feel that you haven't had that personal support and input in terms of the adaptability to meet the different needs, in terms of the flexibility, and in terms of ensuring that you're able to apply for your headship and you're there and you're confident and you get your headship during the time of your programme, but you also get the NPQH qualification. Because I have to say, colleagues, the purpose from our point of view is supporting you to get your headship as well as to get the qualification. And I think there's some stats a bit later on where, over 50% of colleagues, both during the 12 months and within the 18 months, do get headship in that time. And my second support of you will be if any colleagues are applying for headship, people ring me and I agree a time and place, and I do look at best ways of getting you through your headship interviews as well. I'd be a bit worried though, colleagues, if all 44 of you rang me on the same night, but hey, we'll see how that goes. So that's our signature characteristics, and we evaluate and challenge and check ourselves against those. Next slide, please, Tim. I'm going to move through that. I could give you hundreds of feedback from trainees, from colleagues I've worked with over the country. We are very well thought of, and I do hope, colleagues, that I can't talk to you all today personally, that many of you will be saying, actually, Yvonne, the reason why I've come to this WebEx is because we have heard how good you are and how you do meet the characteristics that you've set your standard on. And if you can just flick through the HMI one as well, Tim, and just go straight past it. You know, that's in there just to show what they talk about it. Right, this is what it's important to know, so you can basically see what the work expectation is for, you know, you can do the application, but you've also got to realise once you're successful, this is what you're going to let yourself in for. You will be accessing the development stage of NPQH. The development stage is then followed by a final assessment. That assessment isn't done by best practice. The assessment is undertaken by an external provider. You will have an induction event, which will be a face-to-face, just getting you ready and making the process and practice clear. You have to do 3 essential modules. They will be online and facilitated, which is unique for the rest of the country's licensees. There will always be a one-day follow-up face-to-face event to those essential modules, and you will have a coach tutor allocated to you to make sure that everything's okay, and they check in with you intermittently. I'll talk about that in a minute. So you've got to do 3 essential modules, and you'll have to choose then from a menu of 10 elective modules 2. So in order to get to final assessment, those 3 and 2 plus 9 days in a placement school, you have to do. You will need to also submit an improvement leadership project piece of work that you've done in your home school, and a smaller project improvement piece of work in the placement school. The sort of the roundup at the end of the 12 months framework, we then do what we call a readiness face-to-face event, where we bring everyone together with so for every 4 participants, we have 1 head teacher who give up their time voluntarily to support the process, just to make sure there are activities that will support you when you go for your headship, and obviously activities that will support you when you go to final assessment. And if we just look at that visually, Tim, on the next slide, just looks, I call this a blob diagram. It looks a bit like that then, your supported journey with us once you've got through Gateway looks like that. So you'll have an online introduction, first of all, and then your induction face-to-face. From then on, you will have online facilitate a module, which is like the green blob, the short online course, slightly in the wrong place really. That comes first, followed by a face-to-face event, which is practically orientated, and really staff love it. It follows in the online. It really consolidates and checks in on learning and development. And then the coach tutor does an online tutorial with you, just to make sure that you've not missed anything or if there's anything concerning you. So the journey is online short course, followed by face-to-face practical event, followed by online tutorial checking in that you're okay. That's for the 3 essential modules. For the elective modules, that will be done online, and that isn't facilitated. That's an online course. By then, though, by that time of the year, you'll be so slick that it will be quite an easy sort of process to follow, because you'll be used to accessing the modules. So if you look at the coaching sort of line, every half term you have an online tutorial, and once a term, the red blobs there, you have a face-to-face coaching session. And those coaching sessions will be in peer learning groups of 4. the lilac blobs, and for goodness sake, don't think you've got to do two days in any one half term, but that's just to show you that there's your 9 days, and in order to get NPQH and to go to final assessment, you do need to do 9 days in another school. I'm going to just take a breath there. If there are any questions, if colleagues want to jot anything down, I'll take a couple of questions now. Are there any questions there, Tim, at all?
Yeah, we've got a few. With the 9 days placement, you did allude there that they aren't sort of don't have to be as you put them out there, but do they have to take them in a block? Can they spread them out? And who arranges those 9 days? Do they do it, or does the...
In terms of the competencies you have to show, that you would arrange the best time with the head when to go into the school. I'd strongly recommend, after 4 years of been doing this, that you spread it over the 12, 14 months period. Because one of the things you need to show in both your home-based piece of work and your placement school piece of work is impact. So spreading it out, you're more likely to be able to report against impact. We will allocate to you a placement school that in your locality, or you may identify a school you've always wanted to work in, and as long as it meets the criteria of being good or outstanding and a couple of other bits, then you could go to a school of your choice, but they would need to fill in the commitment form, because obviously of that 9 days, 5 of the days are for your piece of work and 4 days to be shadowing a good or outstanding leader of a school. And some heads do try and fob you off, because outstanding school heads sort of sometimes think, well, but actually that's the whole point of then influencing them to book your time, to arrange the best times, to agree the piece of work for improvement, and it's better to spread it out. I hope that's answered your question. Anything else then, Timothy?
So say a person works in a multi-academy trust. Is it feasible for that placement school to be another school within the trust?
Yes, we can do that, and that's something on the induction. That's mid-September induction day that I'll pick that up with you. We just have to be careful, because the sponsor who has to write how wonderful you are in the placement school cannot be the executive head of the MAT. It would need to be someone different. And as long as we sort that out, because the school that you should be working in should be good or outstanding. However, I've had quite a big debate over the years with the college, National College, and as long as the MAT lead is recommending that you go in to support a school that might be an RI or might be good or might be outstanding, then as long as it's clear how that links, I'll sort that out with you. But you can't have the same head writing, or the same executive head writing your sponsor form. But there isn't a problem with that at all. Another question there, Tim?
Well, somebody asked how many hours does each online short course take? Maybe I can field that one.
You answer that, Tim.
The online short course, it's spread over, normally it's spread over 3 or 4 weeks. The expectation each week about 5 hours, but the idea is that you're visiting it often. You're with a group of colleagues as well, so a lot of that dialogue takes place within yourselves, and you're facilitated by a very experienced facilitator in school leadership. So I have to say that so far on all of our online short courses, there's been 100% satisfaction rate in terms of with the facilitator, and also the learning outcomes as well. So they are quite extraordinary. I look at all the evaluations that come through, and it's that's the thing that comes across time and time again, the value people get from it, because it allows you just to take some time. You live very pressurized lives within the schools and wherever your setting is. So this gives you a piece of time over about 3 weeks or so where you can engage with colleagues over theoretical things, and also how that applies within your schools. It really is a very, very profitable time. So I hope that answers. So 5 or more, I would say, not less than that. So you should be, it is quite a chunk. A lot of reading involved. Remember, you're operating at a master's level, so there is a lot of reading involved. But it's all very, It's very relevant to what you're doing.
I'm the pragmatist here, and I think some things you will know in depth but may not know some of the theory. Some things you'll need to look at greater depth, but you will need to undertake online the core tasks. And again, all of those things will be ironed out once you get through this blooming gateway. So I know there's a couple more questions, but I'm going to move on to the assessment timeline.
Okay.
Don't mind going to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Okay. The closing date is the 2nd of June. And when you look at the online application, it will give you the time for that closing date. In fact, it's midday. No applications will be accepted after midday, and the application will go direct to the licensee of your choice. That licensee, so it could be one of our 3 licensees, will then send and forward your application to the External Assessment Centre. We will know how many colleagues have been successful by the 5th of July. And it will be for us then to say anyone that's not been successful and to confirm with those who are successful where the location of your venue for the face-to-face events will be. I've already mentioned this. If there's inconclusive and not clear, then readiness to go into the development stage will be dependent on an interview. And the interview will either be by phone or face-to-face. We start the programme in September, and the dates will be clarified and be out to those colleagues within the week following the 5th of July before you have your summer holiday. Next one, please, Tim. Right, just in case you didn't know, and I haven't got time to go into all of this, your leadership work and how you put yourself across in the application is going to be linked to those 6 competencies in red: personal drive and accountability, self-awareness and self-management, etc. So the 3 red competencies are those competencies you are going to have to link your leadership work to show how you've shown and exhibited that competency. And I'm going to move on because can you just, if you've got the competency headlines out, could you might just want to read the first one. If you have I'll just be quiet for, so if you look at the competency, if you look at self-awareness and self-management, and we just look at the one-liner underneath this, it says, does this person understand him, herself, and use this self-awareness to make better interactions with others and maximise their impact as a leader? So you've got the competency full statement and then a one-liner where you can actually make a judgment about your leadership work. So in terms of where you've shown that competency. There are 16 competencies in all, but for the application stage, you will only be expected to match examples of your leadership whole school work with those 6 competencies. Next slide, please, Tim. Just before we go into this slide, could you all, it's difficult with 40-odd people, but could you just have a think for a minute about 2 or 3 leadership activities that you've led in the past couple of years? It might be something you've led now where there's been an impact. So have a jot down, like someone might say, well, I've led teaching and learning, and I'm going to say, so what's been the impact? And then you might say to me, well, actually the impact is, Yvonne, that our good to outstanding teaching has increased by 10%. That would be your impact. So just have a little think. I'm going to shut up. A couple of examples of something that you've led and you can highlight impact. And just have a jot it down for me. Right, I know I might have given you time. I need to write maybe one, perhaps two examples. But my first tip of the week for you all is, before you start the application, make a list of significant leadership activity that you have led and that you can identify some impact. It doesn't need to be data-based impact, but where you can, if you have got sort of specific data to show improvements, then that would be great. So my first tip is, create a piece of paper on the left-hand column that you make with your leadership activity, and next to that, just put what the impact, couple of the impact, because I know that some of you will have had more than one impact linked to the same leadership work area. And the reason why I'm asking you to do that is, the hardest thing is then choosing from your leadership list of work that you've led over the last several years, choosing the best example that demonstrates the competency. So once you've got your list, we'll need to select an appropriate example, your leadership activity example, that really shows that you've had to have phenomenal personal drive and accountability. Can you imagine, if one of you put, actually, I really had to get commitment for getting 3 schools to work collaboratively and to push towards academic, because you really believe that was right, and a number of staff, in fact a number of head teachers, just weren't with you, but that piece of work is likely, particularly in the current educational landscape, have needed you to really show personal drive and accountability. What the piece of work outcome for that sort of piece of work would be, well, actually all 3 schools signed up, and now you've gone through all the legal, and everybody's now working effectively as part of a multi-academy trust. Now, that might not be the best example, but what I'm trying to get you to recognise is, create your list first of leadership activity that you've led over the last several years. Check in on what impact you feel that you've made, jot that down. And then the 6, I would, on the top of your little grid, I put self-awareness, self-management, personal drive and accountability, delivering continuous improvement, modelling excellence in teaching, and the other 2 competencies. And then I'd do a little tick list to say, actually, that role in where I've led on phonics, or that role where I've really had to get the middle leaders up to higher standard, in order to impact on some of the subjects they lead, that's really shown, just for argument's sake, delivering continuous improvement or modelling, and I'd put a tick in there. So that sheet of paper is quite important, because it'll do 2 things. It will help you choose examples, and it will help you select a relevant example for each of the competency areas. So when you come to fill your application form in, I'd have the application form, my grid where I've got the leadership roles, the impact, and my tick list of where I think I've shown those competencies, and I'd have my competency headlines, so I can just check in and think, actually, maybe it was more about that piece of work in phonics was more about modelling excellence, because the staff were quite compliant, so I didn't really have to bring myself, sort of my personal drive in that one. The personal drive really came out in that piece of work where with the middle leaders, because we had two middle leaders who just pains in the backs, and really needed to drive that and get them to see why it was important for them to be accountable to help raise standards in the school. It's terrible. I can't see your eyes or see your face to see how you're feeling. So I hope that makes sense. I don't know if there's anyone wants to type in that they'd be willing to talk to me with one of their examples in a minute. So if you want to type in you're happy to talk to me in a second about the example you've written, and you wouldn't mind me then talking to you about it to see where it sits against the competencies, I'd be really grateful. So if anyone can write in that they wouldn't mind me talking to them. At this point, all 40 of you don't want to write in, but I'll come back to that in a minute. I just want to go through the application a bit more. Can you please make sure that you read and answer the question and what it asks you, and do not exceed the number of words or the number of examples it asks you for. The assessor will only grade you according to the 500 words. If you go more than the 500 words, they cross out the words above 500. And for your sponsor who has 200 words, don't let your sponsor, who's usually a head teacher, if you're currently a head, it would be your SIP or equivalent, don't get them to be too verbose. Again, no more than 200 words. It's just not graded otherwise. There's been a big debate about, can I do bullets in my boxes to keep my words down? To be frank with you, it is much better, unless you're really strapped for words, because you've got too many words, to use narrative style to convey your response. The assessor can read into that more effectively. So be tight to the question, be tight to your words, and as much as possible, use a clear narrative style.
Okay.
So question now.
Is it a good time to break in here, Yvonne? We've got Stephanie said she's happy to say something about what she's been doing. Stephanie,
I'll come back to you in a minute.
Yeah.
But not yet. Is there any other questions? Just to...
Yeah. Well, we've got. Hold on a second. Okay. In terms of the pieces of work used on the application, this person asked, could I refer to the same piece of work done in the school for more than one competency? For example, discussing leading on phonics and then referring to that in section 4 and 5.
Right. Where possible, try and use different examples. However, in a really big, as we all know, in a really big piece of whole school leadership work, you could have two, you could definitely use different competencies, but you could also have two different impacts. So you can use the main work example more than once. What you're making sure is that the description you're using about that element of work really tracks into the competency. But I wouldn't recommend you use that example more than twice if you're not able just to use it once.
Yeah. So how far back can folks go in terms of leadership impact examples? Is it only in the last couple of years?
3 years. 3 years. And it says on your guidance, the guidance for yourselves and the sponsors is quite important. So just check in there; it tells you in there. Any other question before I just move on? Another one.
Well, somebody's asked, can you give more examples of evidence that is not data? I would maybe leave info impact out if I thought that it was too soft.
Yes, no, because hard data could be, from a staff meeting because of what. So first-hand evidence is okay. I think just make sure there's a mix there. And remember, data, if you're looking at making a difference to behaviour, it would be the number of incidents where children aren't being kept in detention, or playground incidents, or so it doesn't have to be data where we've increased our GCSE results by 10% or attendance has increased by 3%. the softer data's fine, but make sure it's really tight and make sure it's clearly evident. So the school improvement plan in key area was identified because of feedback from staff, and that could be an impact because of the work that you've been doing. But trying across the 6 areas, try and have some data as well as the impact where maybe it's not specific data, but you've got evidence in, because it's mentioned in the school improvement plan, it's mentioned in staff meetings, it's part of the governance minutes and action notes, that sort of stuff. That would be sufficient to show impact. Do you mind moving?
Sorry, just one final thing. And would it be true to say an application is likely to be unsuccessful if it's not based on enough evidence within the application? I mean, is there can you put too much evidence in?
Don't put too much evidence in because you won't have enough space in your 500 words. I'm going to go through some of the questions very quickly because I'm always on a tight timescale of this hour. But just make sure you answer and break down the question in each section. And if you break down the question, you always make sure that it's very clear about what difference you made because of you leading that element of work, and make sure in the description of how you've done that in terms of what you've done and how you've done it and the difference you've made, make sure it's really explicitly linked to the competency. Okay, so and in fact that leads into what I've just said really, you know, use your word allocation to provide that sufficient to demonstrate how whatever you've led has been led, what you did, and what the outcomes were and the difference made. That's really, really, really important. Can you ensure that your sponsor is briefed? So if you know now who's going to fill in your sponsor section, if you track back, like June the 2nd, I don't know what some of the holidays are like in the south, but that's half term. You know, National College and people don't think of half terms in their life. So I think it's like the 28th of May is the Friday. So you'll need to make sure everything's done and dusted before you have your half term break. So that doesn't leave you that long to make sure you get your sponsor to complete their 200 words. And I will go in a little bit in what I'd expect the sponsor to start off their box. But track back from the 2nd of June. 2nd of June in this neck of the woods is half term. You'll need everything done and dusted by the Friday, which means you don't want to be anxious. So you'll need to get the stuff to your head or your SIP, if it's going to be the SIP doing your sponsorship, before the Friday, because you need to make sure you're walking out the door ready to email everything off either that day if you're on holiday and you're going away, or on the 2nd by midday. And just that last bullet there which is linked to the question I was just asked before, you know, if you can provide quantified evidence of impact, it's imperative you do, but across the 6 areas, you can still show outcomes in different ways. We don't have data for everything, and the assessors recognise that, but you're still talking about outcomes and impact on the application.
Does the data have to be whole school, or could it just be key stage related?
Depending on what the focus for the piece of work is, it could be key stage related, because it may be that the improvement in literacy or the improvement in maths is linked to key stage 3 or key stage 1. And if you've led that, then that's where the improvement would lie, and you'd show some of the stats.
Great, thanks.
Okay, can we just have a quick word? There's Stephanie there. Just if we move just to this, yeah, just do this one first. So this is a big biggie where people do not get through the application, and 10% of people do not get through the application because they tell the assessor what they've done, but it's about how you have applied and led the competency, if you like, linked to creating the best middle leaders ever was because of your resilience, because in the way you've had to influence them, because of your drive and getting them, bringing them to account. It's not about how many meetings you had with them, or in what way did you need to talk to them 20 times. So please, 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 please keep your responses strategic. Do not dwell on the operational, and don't say we, say I. I led the team so that you can then go in, but make sure it's really clear that you are the leader of that piece of work. I've already mentioned have your checklist. That is your Bible for really trying to do a little chess game with yourself on which is the best example against the competency. And before you hand it in on the second, make sure somebody reads it and does a final edit for you before you submit it. And the check on that would be get them to read the question and make sure that you've answered the question. If you just go to the next one, and I'll go to, I might call on Steph then. Can you just go to the next one? So these are the 7 sections of the application. And I'm just going to, I'm really sorry because it's not a face-to-face, I feel I'm talking at you. So can we just put some hands up somewhere to see that you're still all right, and is everybody still feeling okay?
Okay, yeah, we've got yeah, everybody okay? Hands up? Yeah, it's lots of, they're all, most people are putting their hand up there.
Because I'm trying to do it in an hour, I normally do in 2 hours, just because so many people have asked me, would I run this online? The first bit, in terms of the application form, you'll already have the region and the provider will be in there if you go through Best Practice Network. So you know where you're going to send it to. The first couple of pages are self-explanatory. I'm just looking now, and don't open this up, Tim, because I'm just looking now at section 1, your experience and performance as a senior leader. 2 things on that. It asks you for your best 2 recent examples of senior leadership roles. I'm an assessor. I read people in this sometimes do 3 examples, sometimes only 1 example, spend 150 words on 1 example, and then try and do 50 words for another example. Try and make sure you do, well, you've got to do 2 examples. Make sure it's clear what your role was, what difference you've made, so the impact and the positive difference and it does need to have dates. I'd do the first piece, give it a heading, what the piece of work was, what the date was. That would be your first line. Then a description of what it was, how did that demonstrate your readiness, because this is all about, how do you think you're ready for it? What have you done? Number 1 does not link to competencies. It's about your readiness for headship. First example, what's the best one? Second example, what's the best one? Try not to choose 2 where you might have other examples you could use in there, because it might be one of those examples might be better placed under one of the other competencies. So again, choosing the 2 best ones that showcase your readiness for headship. Just make sure you're not taking anything that leaves you a gap with some of your competencies. Read the question. In my view, when I'm looking at this question in section 1 now, it's got 3 parts. Part 1 is make sure you clear roles, what it was that you were doing, how that piece of work showed your readiness for headship, and what impact did it have. And then when did that take place? Make sure you give dates. So experience, roles, what you did, the leadership work experience, and how that made a difference. Try and keep to about 250 words for each of the 2 elements there. For your sponsor, and I'm only going to do this for the sponsor once, it says for the sponsor reference underneath, you are asked to verify. So my first sentence for your sponsors will be, I verify the evidence provided is relevant. Then they can do one or two things. If you've got some additional information you couldn't put in your 500 words, then make sure they have it to reinforce what you've said. And if there is something additional that's shown your readiness for headship, like it might have been that you've represented the school at some really big meetings, and you've had to make decisions on behalf of the school at meetings where it might not slot into it, but actually for that particular one, the school, you representing the school or your MAT or your academy, going to some regional meeting, and maybe something that the head or the principal writes in there. So your first one-liner for all sponsors word limit, I verify the evidence provided is relevant. Then let them give the additional evidence if there is any. And then, if there are any additional evidence to give, let them give it. And if there's any additional little snippet about you and your readiness, let them give it in there. With the sponsor as well, make sure, if you're going to draft something for them, because I know that happens, just make sure that you're not drafting what you think they want to see. Make sure it's specific to enhancing what you've already written, but also extending what you've written, and make sure it answers the question asked as well in 200 words. I am just going to push on one more step, if you can just bear with me. The next sections are very similar in that they all, sections 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, ask for an example, which means one. Only provide for sections 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, one, and I'm saying perfect if you can, example of how you've demonstrated the competency in number 2, self-awareness and self-management. Same principle, it asks for a date. It's broken into 3 sections. It says, say how you have improved your leadership as a result. Now this one is linked to any professional development. If you've been mentored, if you've gone out and looked at other schools, it's not just about reading the Times Education supplement that's made you ready for and self-aware and ready to take on a headship. So this self-awareness and self-management, have a look at what you've ticked, if you like. Is there any, because this is slightly different, I suppose, in a sense that it's about how have you prepared yourself to be a leader that shows that you're self-aware, that you can manage yourself and get yourself ready to apply for your NPQH and then apply for your job. And it says there at the end, please identify then 2 aspects of your leadership that you consider that you need to develop. Now, a lot of people put financial management in there. That would, don't write I'll have all 40 odd of you writing financial management now. You could talk about extending your ability to be less emotional, because sometimes our feeling self sometimes gets in the way of some, you're not going to leave yourself wide open for criticism, saying, goodness me, they're a bit weak if they've given those 2 aspects to develop. But just think carefully about which aspects you think you need to develop. Don't start saying I need to be more strategic, because that won't go down too well. I've already said they want you to be strategic, so that should be something you've already got in your toolbox as a leader. Again, the same for the sponsor. Read that and just be clear about it. So the main thing about section 2, it's about your preparedness of how you've planned to develop and prepare yourself for headship. And that's linked to this self-awareness and self-management. So when you're actually looking for examples, the example there is where you've been on other professional opportunities, where I've mentioned mentoring, where you've actually shadowed any other school leaders, if you've been involved in wider network or alliance meetings or MAT meetings, and you've taken the lead there, linked to that. Right, Steph, do you mind sort of telling me what your example was? What was your leadership role? Tim, is it there? Hello? Can you hear me?
Okay, Stephanie, I've unmuted you.
Right. Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks ever so much. Can you tell me what the piece of work was?
It's implementing pupil premium tracking systems within the school.
Okay. So my first thing to you would be saying, okay, tracking system, so what? What did you do it for?
Initially, we did it to ensure that we were providing the pupil premium children.
It's not we, right? I'm being horrible to you because of time. So what did I do as a leader, and what was its purpose? What were you trying to achieve?
I was trying to identify the areas for development for pupil premium children to ensure that we spend their pupil premium allocation effectively to narrow the gap.
So in what you've just told me briefly there, and if you looked at I'll just read you efficient and effective, because you're looking at effective use of finance in order to support more effective deployment of systems in order to close the gap, because that's what you were doing, weren't you? You were closing the gap, weren't you? So listen to this. It says in under operation, highly effective heads are very effective systems, so that's your tracking system, and processes consistently applied. Efficient, someone who is ready that will ensure that all systems, including financial, are used effectively. So that probably would tie into that, but as everybody's listening, do you know when you think this is a job, drill down into it. So you've got this wonderful tracking system in place, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Have you deployed the funding to the right place, do you think? And how do you know?
Yes, we've got two elements. We've got our data, hard data. I've got hard data.
Right.
And I've also got soft data for the children who needed social input. And I've engaged parents as well within the pupil premium.
School team and staff, sort of the school staff, senior leadership team and parents in engaging and identifying what?
And identifying how we've improved and what they can do themselves at home to help improve their child's learning and social skills within school.
So how do you know the social skills have got better?
In terms of the child in particular I'm thinking of, there's less behaviour incidents logged within school. It's a significant decrease.
Right. Now you've identified, you know, somebody asked earlier on, can one piece of work be linked to two areas? So one element of your work, your leadership work, is linked to the efficient way in which you've placed the financial elements and the tracking system in order to give you effective information that helps you target children. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that would fit. But then you've gone on to tell me, actually, what you've also done as part of this is to get families involved, staff involved, because it's been really important to look at their social and relationships and their behaviours in order to achieve better. The behaviour's got to be better, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, if I had time, and I haven't tonight, I'd probably want to tease that a little bit more with you, because I think that probably fits under delivering continuous improvement. But don't quote me on that. I think you need to, where it says clarify the vision, because your vision's for great behaviour. The strategic direction is, look, these kids, to close the gap, we need to get their behaviour right. What the tracking system is telling me is we've got a group of 10 kids here who we need to get the families involved in order to, but I need to get the vision out and get family to understand why it's important that they work with us on that. Would that be fair? I'm making some of this up.
Yeah.
Can you see how I'm trying to decide where the best place to put that example is?
Yeah, and that's why that tick list would help, wouldn't it?
Yes, and that's why if you just need to just take time on that, because if you take time on that and do what I'm doing with yourself, you'll gauge where the best place to sit, what you've been doing with how, the competence of how you've been doing it. Now, I haven't got I can't go through every single one of them like that, but Stephanie, Thank you ever so much. I hope that's been helpful, and I hope those
Thank you.
found that. And you can say we sometimes, but you're the leader, and ask the lead. You know, just get rid of the we now and again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just to move on then, because I'm not going to go through the other areas in terms of how to fill the boxes in, because section 3, 4, 5, 6, sorry, can we go back, and 7, the modelling on the application is exactly the same, and the tips I've given you in the slides, and then just the tip with Stephanie of how to decide where best then to put my example is all on the slides. The reason why 5, 6 and 7 are in red is because people do find those most difficult. So when you're doing your grid that I've recommended, take time to mix and match your best leadership activity examples with these competencies, and really have that one sheet of A4 I've sent to you, the competency headlines, just to tease out, is this the best one? It's easy then, to be honest with you, to answer the question. Make sure you're clear how the question breaks down into 2 or 3 components. And as I've already said, sections 2 to 7 only ask you for 1 example, and section 2 then asks you for 2 development areas. So can we move on, Tim, please? I am going to run over slightly, colleagues. So that's really the application. There's some tips there. I've used Steph very briefly there to sort of try and tease out how to drill down to sort of get it in the right place. Like, depending on geographically how many of the 100+ colleagues that have contacted us, where you would be placed. You know, at the moment, we're just sort of geographically, this is where we think some of the venues are likely to be. Having said that, if we get another 20 people, 120 from Carlisle, then we'll put a venue in Carlisle. If we get 20 people centred in Beds or Hearts or Swindon, we'd put them there. So, but I'm just trying to show you, basically, we can run groups anywhere, and you'll still get the same standard of head teacher and the same standard of online consultants, online facilitation, and I oversee the lot. So, you know, at the end of the day, if something's not working, then you'd come to me in terms of the programme, and operationally, Hamish, Chris and Beth will support you with that as well. If people are all right just for 5 more minutes, is there a couple more questions there, Tim?
There are. What if a person has only recently come to a school? I mean, how far can they go back to their old school for their examples, or do they have to take it if they've been in their current school for a year? What would your advice be to somebody in that situation?
If you're in a new school, it doesn't matter. And even if you change schools halfway through the programme, it won't matter. That's where my role will come in, or another lead facilitator who may be down in Luton or Swindon. We will make sure that we support you in a way where you know what you're doing. So from the application's point of view, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the school, as long as you're not that far away from headship. Because, you know, you're looking at a window of 2 years, really. In the next 2 years, you should be thinking of applying for headship. There's another question there, Tim.
Yes, what about if you're in terms of this application, what about if you're in the middle of a project and you haven't gone to the end yet? Can you put in what you hope to accomplish, or does it have to be something that's already completed?
It doesn't have to be something you've already completed. It might be something that you carry on. So, for example, you know, you might be at the implementation stage of something that you'd carry on for the next 12 months, that you'd get it to impact and reality in 12 months' time. But it could be something that you're starting linked to the school improvement plan for September, and you just track that through for the first 12 months. And remember, impact is to where you're expecting to get to by the end of that 12 to 14 months. So is there another question there?
Yes, just a couple more. If a person is already a head, or maybe the second year of headship, but they're keen to go on the NPQH program, are they allowed to?
Yes.
Very good.
And
I
I,
think I would just
and lots
sorry.
of colleagues are heads by the time they start, because quite a few people already, I've just had 6 people tell me they've got headships that have been on our NPQH program, and some of their colleagues have said they've got heads, and actually they want to go on to NPQH. So we've had heads as part of the process. There's not a problem. Again, it's something that we talk through with you on a personal level. It helps you.
And the last That's fine.
Yeah.
And the last question here, really, I mean, it's sort of a question, but I know that often we say, because obviously within the program, people are expected to get headship after 18 months, on the program. However, what if a person doesn't find the right headship within that time period? It might be an opportunity to say also about the support given after folks have done NPQH with
Yeah.
us.
We do support colleagues, and to be honest with you, some decisions that are made is that colleagues decide, actually, I don't want to apply for a headship, but the process and the program has helped me evolve as a leader, because it is about you being an even better leader at the end of this program than you were at the start. And we have had some colleagues, not many, I think probably, that have decided they don't want to go into headship. Nobody's going to chase you and say, why have you been on NPQH and you haven't done that? That isn't the issue. The bigger issue is you're learning as part of this development stage, because we will have failed you if you're not even better by the end of this process than at the start of it. And we have got a diagnostic that you'll do at the start of the programme and one at the end that does show how you, the leader, have evolved, as well as your leadership. So it's an evolving thing, and I forgot what the question is. Sorry, Tim. I don't know what
It's
answer.
just really about, if you don't find the right one, where do you go from there? So,
Then we do support you, and the coaches and or myself and or other facilitators will give you some advice and just follow up with you. So you'll not be by yourself. And one of our unique things that people say we're dead good at is just keeping that personal touch and keeping a relationship going with you. It's got to be a two-way relationship. So you would need to keep in touch with us as well. And I think that cuts both ways. And so much so, I can say I interviewed last week. I'm a chair of governors. The 4 people we shortlisted, and I didn't know 3 of those were on the NPQH programme in intake. 1 was intake 2, 1 was intake 4. And because, I obviously knew them, which those that didn't get it, I even gave a 2-hour mentoring session, because one of the gaps, I think, which I've noticed, because it's been ages since I've done a headship interview and process, is that the follow-up on those colleagues who don't get their job, the mentoring following that up. And I think that's something I'm going to talk with best practice of, because if you go for interview and don't get it, then we need to look at that. Conversely, I've already said, before you go for interview, email me, we'll have a telephone conversation. So, that's one of the price promises of our personalisation. Just move quickly just onto the last slide. I'm just conscious of time. Sorry, colleagues, we're going to finish. I think it's really important, how much the programme costs. As long as you do this is the first time, because with the white paper, the NPQ programme is going to change from September 2017. So when you, because I'm going to assume all 40 odd of you will get through application after this session. And you will need to sign up to do your final assessment before September 2000, so to make sure it's within a 12-month timescale. Now, it's likely there'll be some buffer time, but to make sure that the college pays for your, to eligible trainees, the final assessment cost, you need to get it in before September 2017. And for those colleagues in the Midlands and in the South, just if you're in the Northwest, the licensee in the Northwest is is giving £500 to the first 90 applicants. So that will take that 2,250 down for the first 90 applicants for the OLP licensee by £500. So, and that's because the licensee are one of the biggest licensees in the country, and any surplus that OLP make go back to offset and to support to offset the costs. The bigger, obviously, the other licensees get, then the more you'll be able to offset. I have to say, I don't know of any other licensees giving money back to the system, so it's great, really. Really, that's probably it from me. I just thought it was important just to get the, there's another couple of slides you'll see saying how wonderful we are, but hopefully we've given you an insight into who we are. I really do hope that you put an application in. We need fantastic leaders in our schools so that all children take their opportunities. Don't hesitate to get back to me. If you go on to the next slide, Tim, because it's got my email address on, I think. No, it hasn't, but you can contact me. And Tim, do you know when we send this back, can we put my email address?
We'll send it out. We'll send all the details out.
Details. And if there's any issues to do with the application, can you contact CPD at Best Practice, and Hamish or Chris or Beth will give you a hand. If there's anything about the application itself that you're not sure about, drop me an email. Good luck in your future careers. Enjoy your children. Make sure you look after your families, and I promise you that we'll look after you once you're successful through the application stage. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for giving us an extra 8 minutes there. And really, other than Tim and I will hang around for a couple of minutes. If there's anyone there who isn't sure about how to access the paperwork, if you want to hang around and then just put your hand up at the end, then Tim and I will just switch on you, we'll unmute you and just see if we can give you a hand before we go. Take care, everybody. Right. Enjoy your meal and take care of yourselves. Thanks. See you soon. See you next year. Take care. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you. Just to say, colleagues, this session this evening has been recorded, and we will be sending out a recording with the slides to you, and then we'll also include some contact addresses. If I'm conscious that we haven't reached several questions that have been here tonight, don't worry. Our admin team will be looking through the questions, and they will be contacting folks, or so that we can, they'll be producing an FAQ, so we can address most of the main questions that are asked. So once again, just thank you very much for your time this evening, and we do wish you all the best for your future. Good evening.
Enjoy your application. Take care. Bye.